Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Autism Art Summit, April 2022 with PlayStreet. My name is Mini Dwivedi Gopinathan. I'm the founder of PlayStreet Bangalore, India. I'm an RDI consultant, OPT and a feeding therapist, an AEC program co-creator called the Play Talk program, and an Access Bars facilitator. PlayStreet is an organization that provides educational services to help the child with special needs become independent and live up to their potential. We offer parent empowerment programs and integrated schooling programs and a variety of clinical services. Now, you all know that April is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. Hence, we wanted to bring to you the pioneers in the field of autism to guide us all and spread more awareness and knowledge. Today is our 22nd talk, and our incredible speaker for today is Anne Maxwell. Hi, Anne.
Hello.
Anne is a psychotherapist with over 25 years of experience working with children, families, and adults. Trained as a licensed clinical social worker, LCSW, and a registered play therapist, supervisor, RPTS. She's also an Access Consciousness certified facilitator. Young children communicate different from older children and adults. They communicate energetically and through their play. For them, toys are words and play is language. She is fluent in the language of play. She encourages parents to learn this language to reach greater awareness of what their children are saying. And facilitates workshops to groups of parents, educators, and therapists around the world on a variety of topics, including dealing with difficult kids and young adults, all about your kids, and a different take on kids with ADD, ADHD, OCD, and Autism. She is author of the best-selling book, Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree? A must-read book for all the families, caregivers, and professionals interacting and working with individuals for autism. It's an honor to have her in the summit today and talk to us. Today, we are going to talk about a different take on kids with autism, and we would also try to understand the title of her book, Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree? Welcome, Anne.
Thank you, Minnie. Happy to be here.
Our pleasure. Would you like to say a word to our viewers?
Would I like to say what?
Would you like to say a word to our viewers?
Yes, hello, and I'm delighted to be here. I've been to India a few times, and it's been a while with COVID and all that, but I'm happy to be back in this world again. So thank you, Minnie.
Thanks once again. So let's start with talking about your amazing life-changing book. What inspired you to write the book, Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree?
So Gary Douglas, who's the founder of Access Consciousness, asked me if I could help him finish a book that he and Dr. Dane here had started 4 or 5 years before and hadn't been able to get together. And I was a brand new Access Consciousness facilitator and had a therapy practice for 20 years roughly. And I'd always wanted to write a book, and it was a perfect blending for both of us, because I got to weave together what he and Dr. Dane had already written and weave it together with the stories of my caseload. So the title, Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree, comes from a quote by Albert Einstein, which is, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And that describes so much the life that so many of these kids have, because they're so different and they're made to feel so wrong for being so different, and they're not taught the way they learn. I mean, the list just goes on, but they end up equating who they are and the difference that they are with being wrong or needing to be fixed, which isn't true.
The title which you chose actually sums up that what is going to be there in the entire book. Such an impressive title. I love this title. So, see, every time, and this entire title explains about our children in just few words.
Here, it's this one. And I love the picture of this little guy.
Yes.
husband just looked like them. It was like, all right, are you done? Can we move on?
It's an amazing book, and as I said earlier too, it's a must read for everyone. And I have done a couple of book readings also for the book. So let's move to
I've
our
got
next
one
question.
coming up too. So yeah,
Yes, yeah.
and I'm grateful for everybody for that, for doing what they do.
Okay. So when a diagnosis first comes in, parents feel a sense of loss, and life starts being all about diagnosis or label, and the many things that couldn't happen the way it happens with other regular children. So what would you suggest to the parents to help them deal with life better, not only for themselves, but also for their children?
Well, what I ask parents to do always is to ignore everything that the experts tell them. And what I say to them is that you actually know your child better than anybody else does. And a lot of what you know about your child is going to fly in the face of what the experts tell you. But
Mhm.
anytime an expert tells you what something means or makes a prediction about your child, ignore it. And make your choices and decisions based on what you actually know. Experts can give a lot of information, but the conclusions that they draw and the predictions that they make based on that information, I think, are damning. And I think that they actually take away the possibilities that really are available for these kids.
That is the whole idea of doing the summit, where we do not want to function from the conclusions and judgments, but
Right,
we really
right.
want to talk about various possibilities.
Yeah.
So the parents, they go into depression, and for the children, those who are non-speakers, especially in India, we see
Right.
that parents are too focused on bringing the speech in. They really want their children to talk, and they're ready to do anything for that. And when the children are not able to speak, the parents get very depressed. They get into anxieties, and that really translates to a lot of anxieties in children too. So I would really like to take an advice from you that how our parents should accept or understand the situation of their children.
Kids with autism speak, all of them, and not all of them use their words. They communicate energetically, and anytime their language is too slow for them, for many of them, and speaking is much slower than energetic communication. And when babies are born, whether they are diagnosed with autism or not, they don't have the capacity to use their words to say what is going on with them. And so one of the things that moms and some dads learn early on is the difference between a I'm hungry cry and a I'm tired cry and I need a diaper change cry, and kids with autism, I think that the thing that is so difficult is feeling like there's something wrong with them rather than being curious about what is going to work and how to communicate with them. And there's all kinds of new technology that I talk about that in the book, but this is 10 years old, and I'm sure there's even more modern technology that helps kids who get frustrated by their lack of skill at verbal communication and are able to type it out. Sometimes they need somebody else's assistance with that, like that kind of stuff. But the thing that I would encourage parents to do is to let go of all the preconceived ideas they have about what being a good parent is and what being a good kid is and everything that means, and really be curious about your child. Like, what are they saying to me right now? And you'll know Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making any sense at all.
Of course, the whole this conversation which we are having, this comes under the consciousness segment. We have already talked about relationships. We've already talked about movement. We've already talked about other traditional modalities and its effectiveness um, on making the lives of our children better. And we really wanted to connect it with consciousness.
Cool.
What we are talking about here is, how can we, parents, professionals, and communities, can be more conscious about this, and rather than seeing it from the judgment or conclusions, really start looking at the possibilities the way you talk in your book. So of course,
and it has to do with asking questions like, what are they saying? What is this? Right? Rather than, this is the conclusion, this means this. Oh my God, how terrible is that? Like, to not function from that.
But see that, but Nancy, when a child is diagnosed, right? When your child is not talking or not making an eye contact, not playing with the other peers, and when you see other children in your neighborhood or in your families developing a very regular way, and then you happen to see your child is not doing the same things, then automatically the first reaction of the parents is to have some conclusions about the child's difficulties, right? And that's where they get a label or a diagnosis, and a new journey begins. Now, how does our access consciousness help them to overlook these conclusions and start a new journey? That is what we want to understand. So have you come across some parents, those who have really lost the hope, and then you were able to help them understand to not to look at their child with the conclusions, but as a new possibility? So how did you do that?
Ask them questions. So to not come to conclusion, to ask a question like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
And for parents to have a look at themselves, like how much of their self-worth is tied up in having a child with a problem that they then get to solve, or how much of their self-worth is tied up in not having a child with a problem, because that means they're bad. I mean, a lot of this is to have a look at themselves and what's going on with them without making them wrong and without making the kids wrong. But all of these conclusions just lead to heartache. And the antidote to all of this is to ask a question and really trust yourself and sort of, the thing about eye contact, for example, people with autism communicate energetically, and they're like radio towers, and they take in everything around them. And making eye contact with somebody is one of the hardest things in the world for them to do, because energetically they get the download of everything that's in that person's head and in that person's world. So avoiding eye contact is actually a coping mechanism. It's a self-soothing skill, and it's something that should be applauded and encouraged rather than punished for being disrespectful and controlling and rude, and all of that has nothing to do with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's what we want you to tell to our audience.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then isolating, when kids quote isolate on the playground or isolate in school, again, they're not being antisocial.
Mm-hmm.
It's a coping mechanism. It's a self-soothing mechanism that they use to sort of pull themselves back together, so that when they go back into the classroom, they can deal with the level of stimulation that's in there. Mm-hmm. But it's not disrespectful. They're not antisocial. They don't hate other kids. They just need alone time to regroup, to be able to go back in, because they're so much more sensitive and aware and sort of super super, super, super like that, like the radio tower thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, so have you ever met the parents and you have asked questions and they're not ready to believe first about the energetic capabilities of their children? Have you?
Yes, a lot.
So how
Yeah.
do you? Yeah. So how do you tell them about uh, the difference their child is bringing to this planet? Yeah. So I really want to understand that. But it's very
I
difficult for
don't.
me to.
I
You don't?
don't. Minnie, I
Okay.
don't. I
Okay.
don't ever tell somebody something that they can't hear. And
Okay.
as a therapist, that's part of my job, is to get a sense of who they are, what they're available for, what they can hear and what they can't hear. And it is not kind to make parents feel wrong because they don't understand what it is that you're trying to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's treating parents the way the schools treat kids who are different.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody wants everything that I have to offer. In fact, almost nobody does. And so I get a sense of them and what they can hear, and that's all I give them.
And I think that's the biggest kindness and the contribution we can make at the point when they're not ready. Let's not overwhelm them.
But it's not even that they're not ready. It's that presupposes that there's something wrong with them because they're not ready. And if they could just fix this and change that, then they'd be ready. No, that's not their world. That's not what they're looking for. Not everybody is looking for change. Not everybody is looking for something different. Not everybody is looking for what we have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
People are looking for different things. And as a therapist, that's part of my job, to get a sense of that and to not attempt to shove stuff in their face that they're not asking for. You know,
That's a very great piece of information that I'm receiving from you.
But part of the access tools are to ask a question like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of parents that need to have a problem so that they can fix the problem, because they think that that's what a parent's job is to fix problems of their child so that their child looks better or acts better or does better, is happier, or whatever that presupposed point of view is.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's looking for, quote, consciousness.
That is a very big truth.
And there's nothing wrong with them.
No, nothing wrong with them.
But I think one of the tendencies of people who ascribe to a certain way of thinking and a certain way of functioning is that there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And that everybody if they could just do it the right way, then everything would turn out great. It's like, it doesn't happen like that.
That's true.
And one of the things that I've noticed is a tendency of people, whether they're in access or any other particular modality, to basically weaponize the tools that actually do work against people who aren't available for them. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's not kind either. So
I completely agree with you.
Yeah, cool.
So you also would have come across so many different kind of therapists, like occupational therapists, physiotherapists.
Yep, some of the best in the world. I love
Yes,
them.
yes, of course. And
Yeah.
their education is they're supposed to do they're supposed to work with certain aspects of the child development. Like OTs will work with sensory integration, physical therapists will work with gross motor and fine motor, speech therapists will work with speech and language, and that's what their profession is. So my next question is slightly connected to this. So we all know that our children with autism face many difficulties. Again, I know it's a conclusion, but then that's the reason children go to various therapists. So for example, communication based on this reality. which because not everybody can understand energetic communication, or motor difficulties, fine motor or gross motor, or language, or imagination difficulties, or social coordination difficulties. So all the professionals, they work with the individuals with autism in a particular way. So I would like to understand from you, how could they integrate access consciousness into their work, and how could it help their work to become more effective? Is it again a kindness? Is it a possibility? I mean, because
I
so many professionals are also hearing it, and it's just an attempt to make an awareness. Again, we are not
yeah,
creating any
yeah, yeah,
conclusion here.
yeah. No, it it's really less a matter of what your particular modality or training is, rather than who you are and how you approach, right? I mean, so one of the things that I say to all parents of kids who have behaviors that are making life difficult for people at home, at school, or out in the community is there's a blending of, I mean, there are basically two directions to move in. One is with the child, to make them not, and with everybody, to not demonize them for being so different, and to begin to build their sense of value, self-worth, like that, in a lot of different ways. And then the other one is that kids do need to learn how to be able to function more easily at home, at school, and out in the community. So yes, they do need to be taught certain things. Like when you're angry, it is really not okay to smack somebody in the head, right? And so they need to be taught other ways to express that anger. And so all of those different people that you were talking about have sort of different pieces of that pie.
Yes.
But again, the approach is to function more from a question rather than a conclusion, and to ask, like, what is this? And what's another way that you can be with this? And I know that you're angry right now. Is there another way you can let me know besides hitting me? Right? It's not like, and what happens when you hit your brother? And what happens when you don't hit your brother? Right? Like all of that. So whether they're occupational therapists or speech language or paraprofessionals in the classroom or teachers or administrators, there's that balance between, it has to work not only for the child, but for the community as a whole, for the setting as a whole. Does that make sense? And again, it's from asking questions and not having conclusion. There's a difference between a conclusion and sort of the rules. Like, it really isn't okay to hit people in a school. You can't do that. That's not a conclusion. That's just a rule. That's what you need in order to function.
Yes.
And to ask, what's another way? Like, what's another way that this can work? So in terms, I'm not sure where we are in the questions right now, but in terms of communication with kids, they function energetically. And one of the things that I've helped teachers with and paraprofessionals with is what is known as sending the picture. So energetically, what you do, so this is what, so little girl, I think she was 8, in a classroom in New Zealand, and I was working with a paraprofessional, and the little girl was screaming, the paraprofessional walked in the classroom, and the classroom was up in an uproar. Like, I don't know whether it was maybe a substitute teacher or something, and the kids were just out of control. And the little girl was strapped in her wheelchair, rocking back and forth, really upset. And the paraprofessional raced over to her, which agitated the little girl even more. And she said she realized that her energetic state of being, that space, was crucial, key to working with the child. And so she backed off And she sent the little girl the picture of what it's like when the classroom is calm, when she's just sitting in her chair and she's got her hands in her lap and sort of gently rocking back and forth. And she said within a minute, that's what the little girl did. And so you can send kids the picture, like that's how they communicate. How do you do it? You do it anyway. Like all of those conclusions that we were talking about are pictures that we send out to parents, to kids, to everybody. And to be a different space, which is that space of, I wonder what this is. And, or to send pictures, or I know it sounds kind of wooey, but it really actually works. It's a whole different thing. We send pictures to each other all the time. We just don't know it, or we're not aware of it. But any opinion or any point of view that we have about anybody is what we project onto them. And so to change that point of view about these kids and about these parents, right? And really to see there are all kinds of things that open up when you do that. So here's an exercise that your parents can do is try it out. Try that sending picture out. So times where parents that I've worked with have done it have been, for example, in the morning when everything is chaotic and it's really hard getting everybody together and out of the house. The night before and in the morning, night before they all go to sleep and in the morning, have the picture of what it's like when it works well, right? It's not bad 100% of the time. There are times, if you look, where things were easy. So get the energy of what it's like when it's easy at night and then in the morning before they wake up. And then as you're waking them up, and see how it goes. And watch yourself.
So we have to see those pictures and kind of communicate to them energetically and send those pictures to them.
And it's the energy, when you send pictures, it's the energy of it. That there's such a different energetically between, there was a family that I was working with an abusive dad who was an alcoholic, and the mom and the two girls, and the alarm would go off and everybody was sort of like that in the morning. And then the dad would go in the bathroom and turn the shower on and everybody would relax and the little girls would come into bed with mom. And then the minute the shower turned off, boom, everybody was back on alert again and they'd all go out. Like that's how we function. We know that. We pick up energetically what's going on. And so you choose the energy that you would like to be in your home in the morning or whenever the time is, meal times, I don't know, homework, whatever. And you send that energy. It's not necessarily you're going to do this and then this and then this. It's the energy of everybody's ready, backpacks, shoes on, jackets, right? It's not how they get there. It's just the energy of it's all flowing and we get in the car and go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, because I do it. I have read your book many times, so I do it.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't need to go on so long.
Yeah. So I just had a question in my mind and it will come back again.
Okay.
It'll come back again. Let's move to the next question. So again, I know the answer might be similar, and if required, as an answer to this question, if you can help our viewers to understand the difference between conclusion and difference between asking a question, because most of our viewers do not know.
Okay, all right.
So let's
I can do that.
Yeah. Let us see how the question.
Yeah.
Yes.
So most people ask questions because there's a right answer and a wrong answer. And they want to make sure that they get the right answer. And that's what questions are in school. A lot of times there's a right answer and there are tons of wrong answers.
Right.
The kind of question I'm talking about is a question where there's no right answer. And the purpose of the question is to give you awareness or a sense or sort of a knowing of whatever it is that's going on. So in one of the tools of access consciousness is that anytime you know the answer, it's not a question. It's a statement with a question mark at the end of it.
Yes.
Right? The
Mhm.
kind of question I'm talking about is I think it's known as an open-ended question, but that even is a little limiting. It's a question that's designed to give you a sense or give you awareness. So here's an example. What do you want for dinner?
Mm.
Is that a question or is that a statement with a question mark at the end of it?
It's a statement because we are working from a conclusion that child actually wants something for the dinner, which is
Yeah.
which yeah.
It's the conclude three things: that they're hungry, that they want, or that they want to eat, that it's going to be in the form of dinner, that they're hungry, that they want to eat, that it's going to be in the form of dinner. No, are you hungry?
Yeah.
That's a question. When are you going to get your homework done? Sends most kids off into an explosion. Do you have homework? Is a different thing. And so for kids who are on the severe end of the autistic spectrum, you can give them a choice. I mean, you do it energetically. It's time for bed or it's time for a bath. Would you like to do it now or in 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, however it is that you work with them, you know?
Okay.
You want to give kids choice too.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's another tool that works really well with kids on the autism spectrum. It's what I call the 20-minute, 5-minute warning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 20 minutes before it's time to leave, you say to your child, okay, in another 5 minutes, it's going to be time for us to go. And you just give them the information. And what you're doing is you're lodging this information in their head, because chances are good they're doing something that they want to do and that they need to leave that and go do something that they don't want to do, like go to school. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in another 5 minutes, you say, okay, sweetie, another 5 minutes, it's going to be time to go. And you're repeating it. And then 10 minutes, all right, another few minutes, it's going to be time to wrap it up and go. And then when it really is 5 minutes, all right, sweet, time, almost time, got to finish it up. And then it's going to be time for us to go. And 20 minutes is usually enough for them to disengage their brain from whatever it was that they were doing into where it is that they're going. It's magical for going to school, for leaving the house, I use it all the time in my play therapy room with kids who don't want to leave. The 20-minute, 5-minute warning, because I don't know whether I created it or whether I heard about it from somebody, but I used to have to peel kids off me but the 20-minute, 5-minute warning works really well. And then they just get up and they walk out, they're done. And I've had lots of parents tell me that it works. So
yes, and it sounds so exciting. I'm also going to try it.
Cool.
So we have talked about the transitions because this 20 and 5-minute warning, which you have talked about, because we understand that sometimes transitions are tough for our children, as we have just
It's their brains that just
Yes.
get locked into doing something really fun. It's like, no, and they start panicking. And then after 20 minutes,
ease it out.
Yeah.
Great. So I want to come to the next topic, that is about movement. See,
Okay.
as I told you, the whole idea of the summit is to connect relationships, movement, and consciousness.
Yeah.
And we have been observing for many years that movements are really difficult for our children. So, for example, cross motor movements or fine motor movements, or crossing the midline, or bilateral, using both the hands together, or say catching the ball, right? They're just not able to make the assessment of the ball coming to them and move their body and catch the ball. So I'm just talking about movements in general, nothing else right now. So as we understand now that your early movements and what they do during their infancy, when they're becoming toddlers, they're so important for neural development, say like crawling or other things which they do, and whole motor milestone. But they are seeming to have vulnerabilities in those areas, and we have seen it. We have seen it that the cross is.
No, it's true. It is true.
And that's the reason fine motor difficulties are so significant for our children. So again, because we're connecting it, so I just want to understand from you as a therapist, have you come across such difficulties in our children? And can we integrate access with other movement-based therapies, or not with therapies, just like that? Say, for example, occupational therapy, physical therapy, dance therapy, yoga, sports, or in general, outside of the therapy, to ease out the movement difficulties for our children.
So my sense of why movement is so difficult is that they're disconnected from their body.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so anything that helps them to reconnect with their body is the way to go. And again, not all kids are the same. It's going to be different for kids. But one of the ways that I found that works is like kids on the spectrum do, my sense is that they do really well outside, and especially like laying in the grass.
Mm-hmm.
But quote, nature, I live in a community with lots of families, like houses, there's a lake, the mountains are right there. And there are a couple of kids with pretty severe autism whose parents take them out around the lake, and they're these sort of like a dock, except there are no boats, but it breaks away from the path. It's a wooden structure that's sort of like a bridge, except it doesn't go anywhere. And a lot of times the kids will sit there and look at the ducks, look at the geese, look at the water. And other times they go underneath the bridge and play with stuff. But I can just feel their bodies just soaking it up. And that's a way for kids to connect with their bodies, is being outside like that. Another way that I found is riding horses, which may be more difficult for people living in cities or whatever. But one of the therapies that I found to be the most useful is equine therapy for kids with autism. And I've got tons of examples of that, where what Gary Douglas says is that horses' brains and kids who have autism brains function very similarly. Mm-hmm. And it's soothing, it's relaxing to them. It creates space in their bodies. And my sense is that they get to connect with their bodies doing that. Mm-hmm. And then again, one of the things that I really encourage parents to do is to find out what your child loves to do, and then provide them with this as many times as you have time and resources, as often as you have time and resources for them to do that. Mm-hmm. Forcing them to do something because it's going to be good for them pretty much backfires all the time, right? And so forcing them to go to dance if they don't like to, or forcing them to play soccer, to do any of that kind of stuff. But really, again, to let go of everything that everybody's telling you, and ask. You could also ask your child's body, what would you like? Would you like to go riding? Would you like to be outside? Would you like to go to the lake, or go to the water, or somewhere where you're just surrounded by nature?
And nature, I think, brings a lot of ease to our children's sensory needs. The nature, the water, the animals, they bring a lot of ease to our children.
Yeah. Animals, dogs.
Yeah.
All of that. And again, it looks so different from this sort of fact-based, we're going to come up with a different plan or a different program. And there has to be a combination of my child loves to do this, and my child also needs to learn how to act in a way that's more appropriate in a classroom or in a whatever. This isn't about being a doormat and letting them run over you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also about asking a question that doesn't have a conclusion at the end of it, that doesn't have a right answer, but really being curious. All right, rather than say, ask a question, be curious. How about that? Does that work?
Yeah, yes, be curious. Yes.
Be curious, wonder
Yes,
aloud. Huh, I wonder,
yes,
right?
yes. I wonder. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we do in something we call as declarative statements. So we don't ask questions, but we make comments. I wonder if you want to eat. So again, I'm not making a conclusion. So child can say no or yes because it's an open-ended. I wonder if you're hungry. I'm not
Are you
assuming that you're.
hungry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you
Are you
hungry?
hungry, or I wonder you? Okay, I wonder if you're hungry because child might be hungry, might not be hungry. So there's no right and wrong answer. So according to what
Right.
child wants to say at
Right.
that time is allowed to say without making any conclusion.
Yeah. There was, I want to, can I just tell you a story that about,
Yes.
I was flying from Houston back to Denver, maybe 6 months ago, and I was sitting in business class. And so I was one of the first people on the plane, and I was I think in the second row from the front, either second or third row from the front. And you know the jetway that leads from the airport, that covered thing that you walk through to get onto the airplane. All these people were flowing through, and then I heard this screaming that was a little faint, that got louder and louder and louder and louder. And it was when the scream and the two people entered the airplane. It was a dad who was clearly embarrassed, clearly just gritting his teeth, and an 8 or 9-year-old girl who was obviously autistic and completely freaked out and just screaming at the top of her lungs. And the dad had her in one of these hugs where he had, I don't know, an arm or both hands around her ankle, and then another one, so that he was holding her up, maybe knees up like that, so that her knees were up like that, and he was gripping her so that she couldn't move, and she was just screaming at the top of her lungs. And I could feel the whole airplane go, oh God, right? And so they went towards the rear of the airplane, and she kept on screaming and screaming and screaming. And the flight attendants were running up and down, and you could feel everybody on the airplane going, oh my God. And finally the pilot came on and said, all right, as soon as everybody settles down, we'll be able to close the doors, and then we can take off, but we can't do it until everybody settles down. Like that kind of judgment thrown at the dad, thrown at the little girl. And this flight attendant came up, it was a guy, and I grabbed him and I said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've had a clinical practice for 30 years, and I've worked with a lot of kids like that little girl. Let me know if there's anything I can do. And he just dropped to his knees and he said, we really need some help. And I said, here's the deal. She has autism and she is completely freaked out. So what she's reacting to right now is the agitation of everybody on the airplane and all the flight attendants and the pilot going, you need to stop this. And I said, here's the deal. When you are with her, you need to lower your blood pressure, breathe, don't make eye contact with her, and give information that you want her to hear to her dad. Like speak to her dad and say, you know what? We're almost ready to go. And this airplane is really safe to fly. And when it gets up in the air, it feels so good because it just kind of rocks your body. And I don't know, I gave them some other things to say. And I said, but you really like keep the flight attendants away who are freaking out about this. Keep them away from her. And he said, okay. And he turned around and went back. And pretty soon she quit screaming. And pretty soon the airplane settled down. And he came back and he kneeled down again and he said, I think maybe he was a gate guy. I don't think he was a flight attendant. I think he was customer service in Houston. And he said, can I tell the flight attendants to check with you if anything else comes up? And I said, absolutely. Right? Like that. And so I don't know why I told you that story, but there's so much that's possible out there. I didn't march back to the back of the plane and say, I'm a therapist and I can help you. It's like, so when I say to you, you ask who can hear what and what's going to help. That's just an example of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think this story came as a great contribution because what you just told happens many a times, especially during flights or in other, say, functions, in marriages, wherever there is a reason for our children to really get a lot of information which they are not able to deal with. And everybody freaks out. And
right.
more we freak out, our children freak out even more.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, exactly. So if we are able to keep that calm, I think that way, and rather, and as you said, don't work from conclusions and judgments. If you're able to keep a calm, and what you've suggested in last half an hour, if you're able to do that, I think our children will also feel very calm and much more, I mean, they will have a soothing experience.
Right. And that, one of the tricks is to give whatever information you want the child to have to the parent or the teacher or the paraprofessional or the nurse or the doctor or the flight, whoever. So because that straight on is too much.
Right. So not directly to the child.
If they overhear it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a great advice.
Cool. And it's something that we can all do,
Yes.
Yeah,
these are simple suggestions, right? Which are so doable, but we just end up doing everything wrong when such situation happens because we all freak out, we all get panicky.
Right.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm. And when they walked by, I didn't look at the little girl. I didn't make eye contact with her. I made eye contact with the guy and I smiled at him because I knew exactly what was going on. It's like, oh my God. I think she probably was given a tranquilizer or something that hadn't kicked in yet. Because I think she slept for the rest of the flight, but at least she got settled down enough. So anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's move to the next question.
Okay.
And it's about play therapy. So you are a play therapist. Do you integrate play therapy with Access?
I do.
Okay. So give us some tips. Give us some tips. How do you do that? Would you be able to give us more ideas on how you use play therapy for individuals with autism? We would really love to learn from you. One or two tips.
So there's a sort of a conclusion, though, about how you can play with kids with how play therapy works with autism. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it necessarily does. I don't know that it necessarily doesn't. Mm-hmm. The kids with autism that I see in my practice are kids who like doing some of the stuff that's in the play therapy room. So I had one little boy who was 10 years old who was definitely on the spectrum, highly functioning, brilliant, and irritating to everybody at school, at home, and out in the community. Like, it just pain in the neck. And he would come in and and just vent about how mean the kids were, how stupid the teachers were, blah, blah, blah. And he was brilliant with Legos. And he built me basically an aquarium of these multicolored, really exotic fish. And it was stunning. It was just stunning. It was in the, I don't know, this was probably 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I don't make them be in the room. And play therapy works for some of them and it doesn't work for all of them. So
it's a very crucial information.
yeah, no, it really is. And the way I am in the play therapy room is that kids are in charge.
Okay.
I'm not the boss. I wrote another book, which is this, called The Keys to the Magic. It's the first book I wrote.
Okay.
It's a play therapist's handbook of family-centered play therapy. And it has, you may want to get it. It has tons of access tools in there.
I definitely am going to.
Tons and tons and tons of them. So, yeah, again, so the rules in my play therapy room are kids are in charge, and they're allowed to invite their parents in. They can invite their parents in if they want, that they can kick their parents out. If the parents come in, that everybody needs to know that the kids are in charge, and the parents need to be okay with that. And if they're not, then they can't come in the play therapy room. But I said, that means that if they tell you to shoot them, you need to do that. Or if they shoot you, you need to drop dead on the floor, or ask, am I supposed to be dead, or am I just supposed to be down? Right? Like that. And I said, these are special rules for the play therapy session. They're not rules at home. This is just Anne's play therapy room. And that's the rule. And so I do that because I want to find out what's going on in the kid's world. And when I put the kid in charge of what goes on in the play therapy room, I get the download almost instantly of what it's like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And my next question is connected to it. So as you said, Legos, the child really built beautiful Legos and multicolor fish. But I'm sure it requires a lot of imagination also to be able to build something imaginative or creative. Have you come across children? Again, it might look like a conclusion, but I have come across many children who are not able to imagine, say, anything. So when I give them Legos, they just pack it up. Or when I give them colors, they basically just take the brushes and they're just stroking in one direction randomly. And then we try to basically shape it to something. Again, we are not looking at a meaning or something, but the experience which child can get. So somewhere I find that I've come across that sometimes imagining something abstract, which is not concrete, is difficult for our children. Have you come across such situations where children were not interested in anything? Let it be Legos or bubbles or balls or so they just want to, say, for example, take a wire and just flap. In such situations, what would be some ways parents could help basically develop some imagination in our children? I mean, should we do that? Should we not do that? How should we go about it?
In the play therapy room, I don't give kids anything.
Okay.
They're in charge. I don't make suggestions. I let them be the ones that pick.
Okay.
And then if they don't want to be in the play therapy room, I'll ask them, I'll say, I'm happy to help you not have to come see me again, but what is it? How come your mom thinks this is a good place for you? Like, what's going on?
So you please finish your sentence.
No, go ahead.
Even if, for example, they don't go to there must be some material in your play therapy room. They don't go to anything. And if they're just running around, say, from one corner of the room to other. So how would you interact?
The play therapy room may be too stimulating for for some kids with autism.
Okay. How do you interact?
Well, if it's too stimulating, I say that to the parents. And I have two offices. One's a play therapy office, or one's a play therapy room, and the other's my regular office. But not every child is suitable for play therapy.
So yeah, as you just said, play therapy does not work with every child.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay.
But this idea that I think that kids function the way you're describing when they've been molded into being who they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, Gary asked me to create a school for kids, for these kids, that was an access school. So we did an online school for a year, and most of the kids were on the spectrum. And one of the things that we did was, there was one little guy who was like 100% bugs. Everything was bugs. So math was counting bugs. Science was learning about bugs. Writing was writing about, I mean, I can't remember all the things, but we went with what he was interested in, and we didn't try to force him to learn other stuff. We did the curriculum based on his interest.
1 second, I think my battery is. Thanks. I need to switch on. Sorry.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes,
So
please.
that's how we did that.
Okay. Okay, that's a great piece of information. I'm going to ask the next question, which I think I've already answered, but still I will go through this question. In the current therapies, we use a lot of visual schedules to break down tasks and help our children understand and learn how to do things. So is there a better way to help them navigate the complex world without structuring everything out for them? As I understand that one lifetime is not enough if you have to teach everything to our children. If explicitly, if you have to teach everything, one lifetime is not enough. So how do we ease the implicit learning for our children?
You just ask what's going to help them. For some kids, pictures of the day, I mean, like literal, actual pictures, wake up, breakfast, get dressed, go to school. Like pictures help. For other kids, it doesn't. You just ask.
Just ask.
Yeah.
Question. Yes. So the last question I will ask. So would you be able to share some access tools? I think the one important access tool that parents can use, the most important access tools.
I think the most, so one of them that we haven't talked about is asking them, these kids take in everything. And so one of them is to teach them the difference between what they're perceiving as a radio tower and what's actually theirs. So is this yours, or are you just picking up on it? You know, and you can give the example of walking into a room when somebody's really angry in the room and knowing it without the person saying or doing anything, right? That they're just picking up on it, but that anger that they're feeling belongs to that person, not to them. Right. So there's so many tools, that one, and then asking a question that really is designed to give information. It's not designed to conclude. Those are the two.
Great. And both the tools are there in the book. So
yes, and there are tons of tools in this book too.
The keys to the magic. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we come to the end of our conversation. And on behalf of PlayStreet team, I would like to thank you again, Anne, for your valuable time and for sharing your knowledge with us. So I hope all the viewers, they got to know a different take on kids with autism, and also they got to learn some tools. And please do go and read the book. And that's going to be a great contribution to everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Take care and goodbye.